the really good mediators, I think, have a high degree of, emotional intelligence, that they can read the room, they can read different situations and adapt their approach to whatever type of situation they're dealing with.
Howdy, and welcome to the show. Cooper's Code focuses on legal issues and notable practitioners, distilling wisdom so we all achieve the best results for our clients. I'm Miles Cooper, and it is a special experience for me to share part 2 of this conversation with Nolan Armstrong. You mentioned family situation. Can we talk a little bit about your son?
Yeah, for sure.
From what I understand, one of your sons was diagnosed with autism at some point. Is that fair?
Yeah, my youngest.
Can you tell me a little bit about what that has been like as far as being a parent is concerned?
Yeah, I always tell people it's really difficult, but as difficult it is, it's even more rewarding. So when his name's Doug, he's the 6th grader, he's 11 right now. Probably when he was 3 or 4, we started noticing some abnormalities in his development. His speech was certainly delayed, and just some of his other mannerisms and effects kind of got us thinking. And then by the time he was 5 or 6, we knew that something was different. We started the process of getting him diagnosed, and have been working on it as a family ever since. But it's been great, to be honest with you. I mean, I think more than anything in my life, that has helped me be empathetic, because I see him going through the world that, for autistic people, the world's not made for them. They're living in somewhere that's made for, neurotypical people, and for neurodivergent people, it's a strange world. And he's such a happy guy, and just, plods through each day, through all the challenges, and does it with a smile. And it's really inspiring to see. I mean, I try as much as I can to put myself in his shoes. I don't think I ever really fully get there. It's impossible, but as much as I can, it makes me happy, and just happy that people like him are in the world. I think we're all better off the more we're exposed to situations like that.
Also, in terms of putting yourself in other people's shoes, a lot of the work that we do in this field, the personal injury field, involves people who've been through some very awful things, including sometimes long hospital stays. You also, as a family, had that experience recently. Do you feel that experience taught you or helped you understand a little bit what it's like to be on the receiving end of being in an institutional setting?
For sure. Just for the listeners, that in October, Doug got really sick, and we spent almost 3 weeks in the hospital, most of it in the pediatric intensive care unit. And he was ultimately diagnosed with a condition called acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, which basically means your brain and upper part of your spinal cord is inflamed. And as a result, not working at all. The nerves don't conduct. And so he was about as knocked out as you could be. So it was crazy, and certainly not an experience you ever see coming. But yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, I was just sitting there thinking, how did we end up in this situation? We never saw it coming. And how do we deal with this? How do we get through the day? And you do. You put one foot in front of the other, and make the best of it, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, you certainly are sitting there thinking, this is an awful situation to be in, and how awful does it feel? I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. It was just awful. And yeah, I mean, the hospital's filled with people who are in awful situations, and you walk by the rooms, and you don't know exactly what's going on in that particular room, but your heart goes out to that person because of what they're having to deal with. And I've seen it over the years in my cases. I mean, I've never been callous to what happens to people in these horrible situations that ultimately lead you into litigation. I've always felt, a connection to those plaintiffs that have it difficult because of something that they had no control over, right? I mean, that's, I think, ultimately the feeling that a lot of these injured individuals have is, I didn't do anything to cause this, and this is the sort of the card I've now been dealt in life, and like, how do I deal with it? And I sympathize. It's got to be really, really hard. I mean, we try as humans to control as much as we can, and the outcomes and everything. And when it's all taken out of your control, it's tough.
Have you found it hard to, whether it be compartmentalize or to set aside? You have a day where you're taking a deposition and you're sitting across the table from somebody who's had a life-altering or perhaps lost a loved one. When you go home at the end of the day, how do you transition from that role as questioner to that role as parent and spouse?
To be honest, it never really affected me that much. And I think in part because I always, when I was taking that deposition, tried to be as considerate and kind as I could be to the person across the table from me. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to ask all the questions that I need to ask, but I'm going to make sure I ask them in a way that the other person knows that I'm doing my job, but I'm also treating them like a human being, and a human being that's in difficult circumstances. So, I think, and people responded to that by, being candid. And I wasn't in a lot of combative depositions where you're worn out at the end of the day. I mean, it certainly happens from time to time, but with the plaintiff themselves, it was few and far between. So it was easier to go home and think to myself, okay, I did my job today, but I did it in a way that was the right way to do it, at least for me personally, in my style.
You strike me in our engagements as somebody who does a very nice job of that, who, even with high conflict individuals, may not get sucked into their mess. Do you have any suggestions for people for how you've managed to do that? Because even if you are as kind and deep listening and non-engaging, there are still going to be lawyers that 1 to 5% of people who are just flat out assholes. How have you dealt with those types of personalities when you've had to engage?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I've gotten irritated and done things that I didn't want to do. When that happened and when I did get irritated, I try to just, take a step back, don't escalate. If you can, try and even diffuse the situation, take the high road, right? Just pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm sorry, I just sent that email. Even if you knew that the other person deserved it, I'm sorry I sent it. I wish I said it some in a different way. So that's helped, not being the one who escalates. I mean, you're still going to run into people that still will escalate, and even in that kind of conversation. And for them, I just look at it, it's like, how exhausting must that be to go through life like that in your career, right? That's their problem. It's not mine. I certainly, when you're dealing with people like that, your antennas are up and making sure that, you're protecting yourself and your client as much as you possibly can. So sort of the congeniality of the practice gets thrown out the door, and you are in more confirming everything mode. And, it's annoying to practice like that, but, some circumstances you just have to. But again, I just tried to remove myself from the toxicity as much as I could. But that's not to say it doesn't bother me. I had plenty of cases where the lawyers wore me out, or, otherwise looked at it back and thought there was nothing fun about that experience.
Yeah.
That's part of the job, right? Unfortunately.
It is. Yeah. Every now and then you get that pleading and look at the name and go, oh, I remember that one.
Yeah. And I've looked at it too. Like, the more you can practice in a professional, civil way, the more you're influencing the culture of lawyering, so that we have fewer of those people and that they're more the outliers. That's really what we should all be striving to. I think our lives would be a lot better if that was the case, and a lot less stressful.
As we bounce around a little bit, I know there are a number of different mediation enterprises out there, and I know that you chose to work with Signature Resolutions. Was there a reason that you decided to go with Signature amongst the various options that were out there?
Yeah. Just looking at the panel, especially down in the Los Angeles area, but also what they're building up here, they bring on only very accomplished people, whether they're retired judges, lawyers, and I was just honored that they asked me to join. I didn't expect it. And I felt like an opportunity I just couldn't turn down. And, after the fact, it's only been validated by everyone I've met and talked with. I mean, they're just all so accomplished and also really good people. And I think it also was helpful for me, at least, to be able to join a smaller group up here. I mean, it's a big panel down in the Los Angeles area, but it's still growing up here. And I liked the opportunity to get in when it is small and not sort of get lost in a bigger, more established panel. I mean, the odds are it would have worked out fine regardless, but for me, at least, it just felt like a good fit. And they made a promise that they would do everything that they could to support me as I got started, and that's been true, and even more so than I expected. So it's all since I made the decision, all been validated as the right one.
And you're going in at the same time that you're completing your year as president of the Association of Defense Counsel for Northern California, Nevada?
I'm actually the immediate past president right now.
Okay.
So you stay on the board of directors as a has-been for 1 year after you're the president. So I was the president for 2023.
Okay.
Actually, in 2 weeks, there'll be the annual meeting of the Association of Defense Counsel, and I will be officially off the board of directors.
I got the year wrong, but it still tees up my area of questioning in terms of the decision to get involved in leadership with the ADC. Can you tell us a little bit about what the ADC does and why you decided it was important to be involved in leadership there?
Sure. It's an organization of around 600 defense lawyers in Northern California and Nevada. I think most in sort of the quote unquote insurance defense space, but civil litigators, trial lawyers. And the mission is really to train the next generation of defense trial lawyers. That's what it's always been, to educate and have a good time doing it, and build that camaraderie and those professional connections that make the difference, I think. I don't know exactly how it ended up being that I got involved with the leadership. Our firm has had a spot on the board of directors for as long as I can remember. Mike Ney was on it initially, and then Tom Beatty, Marty Ambacher, Dewey Wheeler. And then when Dewey rolled off, I took over for him. So it was sort of more handed to me in terms of ending up on the board of directors.
Boatman on the river Styx?
Pretty much. And then I think I was on for maybe 3 or 4 years before I was asked to accept a leadership position. And at that point, I just saw it as something that was going to be really fulfilling. It was worth my time. I'd met so many great people, and it had become something, for me at least, that didn't even feel like work anymore. It was fun, and I was going to hang out with friends and do something that I thought was important. And that's what I always tell younger lawyers in particular. That's what you should be going for when you go to an event that you view as something that promotes your professional development. If it can feel like it's not work, you're going to want to keep doing more and more of it, and it's going to benefit you even more and more in the long run. And it didn't take too long with the ADC for me to feel like that.
I look back with fondness on one of the events earlier this year. There was a San Francisco Trial Lawyers Association and Association of Defense Counsel mixer. And am I correct that you had some part in pulling that together?
Yeah.
And can you tell us why you decided to do something like that?
Well, it's been a long time coming. I thought. I think that generally speaking, we all don't get together enough. And by all, I mean the plaintiff and defense bars. We're all doing the same job. We see each other, in a professional setting, in depositions or trial or whatever it is, but we don't socialize that much. And I think that became especially true with the pandemic. And the reality is, I felt like with the pandemic, we started seeing each other so often by Zoom only. And I really personally missed the days of where you had a case with somebody and you ended up seeing them a bunch of times during a 1 or 2 year period at depositions and having lunch with them or grabbing a drink after a deposition, whatever it is. And, I made friends with plaintiffs' lawyers through that process. And for me, at least, I just feel like the younger generation of lawyers has been deprived of that. And I think they're being deprived of something really important in building those type of bonds, and learning how to interact with your adversaries in a more civil, professional way. And the more you hang out with people, you realize that, like I said, they're just humans. They're just doing a job too. We're a lot more alike than we are different, I think, on opposite sides of the bar. So it just felt like a good time as I was rolling off the board as the past president. It was my last chance to do it, and it was really fun. We had a great crowd, and I'm hoping that it becomes a tradition that we do every year. I think it'd be really important to keep doing it, and it was certainly great seeing a bunch of people that I hadn't seen for a while.
I bring it up because I think that the challenges with civility that sometimes pop up in our field can be better addressed when people know each other as humans, as opposed to that opponent on the other side of a case. And so I thought it was fantastic, and I really appreciated you taking that on.
Oh, thanks for coming. Thanks for drumming up support. Yeah, it was great. I mean, like I said, I hope to go to them for many years.
Yeah.
But I agree. I mean, I think that is sort of the key to civility, and it's understanding that the other person is just doing a job. And if they're doing it well and professionally, what are you really complaining about? Even if they're beating you, right? Like, that's just sometimes how it goes. You're going to get beat. You shouldn't blame them for beating you. That's what they're trying to do and what they should be trying to do.
But if I don't blame them for beating me, I have to confront myself at some point.
Well, you better learn how to do that as a lawyer pretty quickly, I think, to be happy. I think that's the hard part of being a young lawyer, is that you want to be perfect. You don't want to get beat. You don't want to make mistakes, and those are tough conversations with yourself that you got to be willing to accept that those kind of outcomes are going to happen over the course of your career. But, for me, at least, I think the people that can't accept that, those are the ones that end up being disgruntled and unhappy and do get in fights with people all the time. It's just, again, I get back to it's an exhausting way to practice and live.
Do you have any values for yourself, personal values, that you feel are important for you in terms of how you approach the practice? And by the practice, I'm now extending that into your new role in mediation as well.
Yeah, and I think the values are interchangeable, whether I'm a defense lawyer or a mediator. I think be conscientious, hardworking, pay attention to the details, but at the end, for me at least, it's always to have been empathetic, kind, and try to understand someone else's position as much as I can. As a lawyer, I think that's probably the most important thing, is the more you understand the other side's case and you're willing to open yourself up to maybe even agreeing with some of the arguments that they're making and having the sort of the mental agility to do that, I think the better off you are as a lawyer, because you see it coming and you figure out how to plan and deal with those arguments as best as you can, even if you think they're better than your arguments. But again, I think that's hard for a lot of people. Like they sort of get locked into that myopic way of looking at an issue or a particular situation. You just can't get off it. But for me, at least, it's always just been be thoughtful and willing to change my mind. It's helped a lot over the course of my career. And I think in mediation will be helpful because, ultimately part of the mediation process is that at a minimum, people need to understand where the other side's coming from. And if they do, I think it allows people to sort of change their minds or at least adjust what they're thinking about a particular outcome. If you get people who are real rigid in their approach and thinking, it's hard, but you just got to open up those lines of communication that let them at least hear, right?
You talked about doing a number of panels as you were evaluating whether to make this transition. Were there certain things, moments, an anecdote that where you look back and think to yourself, yeah, that person was really rigid and this technique really helped, or this way of helping channel the conversation really helped in them breaking free of that rigidity?
Yeah, I mean, I think that generally speaking, as a mediator, asking questions of the other side, whether it's the lawyer, I mean, it's usually the lawyer, but sometimes it's an insurance adjuster also, asking questions that sort of inherently frame the way you're looking at something or something that you're trying to communicate but do it in a softer way really helps. Like versus, hey, this is what I think, or I think you're looking at it the wrong way. And instead saying, have you considered, this argument that's going to be made on the other side and how you might respond to it, and get them to explain that. And a lot of times if they don't have a good explanation, they convince themselves to some extent that it's something they need to think about a little bit more and factor into the way they're looking at a particular case. But I think the bare knuckles, like, hey, you've got a crummy argument here, you need to settle, or, for a plaintiff, hey, you're asking for too much. There's no way that you're ever going to convince the other side to pay that in this particular case. People, again, I think they're a lot of times stuck in the way they look at something, and attacking that belief isn't going to get you anywhere. But kind of softening them off it and letting them arrive at the conclusion on their own, hopefully, can be helpful.
If you're enjoying what we're doing here with the Cooper's Code, please help us extend our reach by giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and consider sharing an episode with a friend. Additionally, we want to know who you want to hear on the show. Have an interview suggestion? Email us at podcast@coopers.law. We talked a little bit about personal interactions. Do you think that you're going to have a preference or a leaning in terms of in-person mediations versus what has become quite ubiquitous with Zoom mediations?
I don't know if I'll have a leaning in terms of, I think in terms of how they're scheduled, I think they'll mostly be Zoom. I mean, it's just kind of how it's going, and I think it's continuing to progress post-pandemic, partly from a convenience standpoint when you have decision makers who are typically now on the defense side out of the state. The insurance companies aren't going to fly those people out anytime soon unless you're talking about a really high stakes mediation, and even then it's hard. I'd like to see more hybrid where maybe attorneys are there and the plaintiff's there, and you have an insurance adjuster on Zoom with the defense lawyer. I would prefer that. Like I like seeing people. I like the idea that everybody is invested in showing up to one spot and can't just click leave the meeting and be done with the whole process. But the Zoom mediations work too. I mean, I think a lot of these cases are settling and it's working out okay. It's just from a interpersonal standpoint, I'd like to see people more often.
From a mediator perspective, what would you like to see either side have done before the mediation occurs to help make sure that it is teed up properly for you to be able to get it to some form of resolution?
I think well-prepared briefs is a great starting point. On the plaintiff side, it doesn't have to be, attaching, every medical record to the brief if it's a personal injury case, and where you have a 15-page brief with 1,000 pages of exhibits. You don't need that.
Guilty.
It happens. Yeah. And I understand it. And there's some benefit to it insofar as all the information's in one spot when you need it for mediation. But if you're going to do that, be able to point the mediator as much as possible to the things that really matter in your case and that you want to use when we show up to the mediation to further the other side's understanding of the important issues in the case. Because especially in cases where there's a lot of medical records, you just don't know how it's been reported up to that point on the defense side, what they're paying attention to. So, in the plaintiff's brief, really highlighting these are the big issues that we see, and here's where you can get the evidence that supports them. Having your client on the plaintiff side at mediation, I think, is really important. I like to meet the plaintiff, assess his or her witness appearance and demeanor, because I think it's really important, especially when you have a real good plaintiff, to communicate that to the defense room and highlight it, because oftentimes you don't know how that's been reported either. I mean, everybody has a different reaction to meeting someone, and maybe a defense attorney didn't think that the plaintiff made a great appearance in deposition, but if I meet them and I think something different, I'm going to let the other room know. And I always try and ask, what do you think about the plaintiff? Again, asking questions so you don't step into it too quickly. But I'm also not shy about expressing that opinion. And listen, I do think you've got a really likable plaintiff here, and you need to consider that as part of your evaluation. On the defense side, I think, if you're going to make arguments at mediation, make sure they're substantiated. So, if you're really going to push on, liability in a personal injury case, and have it worked up by experts then before mediation, versus just sort of relying on a higher view analysis of liability, because that's not typically going to move the needle in the plaintiff's room. But if they know that you have well-qualified experts, if those experts even have generated reports that can be shared through the mediation process, that can make a difference, especially in those tough cases where you got to get over that hurdle of liability before you really even talk money.
Nolan, I'm rolling this back a little bit. You're at an established practice. You're a partner. You've been there almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, you decide that you're going to make this change. How do you initiate that process, either with talking to mediation firms or to talking to your partners or what have you, in terms of launching this new phase?
Well, it started with talking to my wife. Like I said before, we had to really work through it on our own and make sure that that it was going to be the right decision for us as a family. And once we said yes, I was lucky that I was close to Vivian Williamson, who's at Signature. I've mediated with her a bunch over the years, and she's been a real mentor to me. So when the time came, it was an easy conversation with her to say, what do I do next? How do I do this? And she was kind enough to say, well, let's start by having you talk to Signature. And then I knew other mediators in the space that I leaned on for advice. But ultimately I had to decide in my own mind, like, I'm going to do this and then figure it out from there. And it was a little awkward at first, honestly, because as I'm working through the process of which company I'm going to join, I've still got this really busy litigation practice and getting, new case referrals constantly. And when I was 90+% sure I was just going to do it, within the next year or so, I stopped taking new cases. So there was a period there where I wasn't taking new cases and wasn't able to share with the folks who were sending me cases why that was happening. But that's helped in terms of not having this huge load that had to be dealt with when I depart from the firm. But it's been challenging in terms of finding homes for cases, and the firm has been great to work with. Everybody's been really, really supportive. I tell people I'm not leaving because there's anything wrong at McNamara. I love my partners. I love the culture there. I'm very happy there. My practice was as robust as it's ever been the last couple of years. I had more work than I knew what to do with, which was great. So it's nice to be able to go out on your own terms, right? But it's still a challenge when you're going out and sort of going full bore and trying to close that down is not an easy transition in all respects.
The corollary question, and I'm trying to ask it without being impolite, you don't have as much gray as a lot of the folks who make that transition. Meaning, oftentimes it's a retired judge, it's a litigator who's gotten decades of practice in, and you've got 2 decades, but not 4 decades.
Right.
Why now?
Well, I got a lot of gray, Miles. Or a fair amount, at least. But no, you're right. I'm practicing for 20 years, and a lot of mediators that make the transition are doing it when they're 30 plus years into practice, for sure. And I thought about doing it that way. I think my main concern was when I got to that point, when I'm 55, 60, was I going to have the energy and the desire still to do something that I really wanted to do? Litigating's hard, it, right?
Yeah. That's why I podcast.
Yeah, right. 2 fun things too, right? I always tried during the course of my career to do fun things, right? Take vacation, make sure I maintained my hobbies, spent time with family, but even so, it's still hard. It's a hard lifestyle. And I'm the type of person that if I'm going to do it full bore and be as good at it as I can be. And I could just kind of see forward, like I said, 10, 15 years from now, I might be pretty burned out and not want to mediate, or I might want to mediate a little bit here and there. And I don't know. At that point, I don't feel like that's really a career, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just something you're kind of doing to forestall a total retirement. Versus I'm looking at this as the next phase of my career, something I want to do for as long as I can, really. I mean, I don't, and I didn't want to be in a situation where I felt like, I had to retire. Like I'm so burned out that 10 or 15 years from now, I can't imagine working any longer. I'd rather be in something where I can't imagine stopping doing it. And I felt like mediation suited that type of mindset a lot better than being a litigator. I mean, the fortunate thing is if you're health permitting, you can do it for a heck of a long time, and you can wind it down a little bit where you're not doing it quite as often. You can travel and do those sorts of things, but it just presented a longer working life that I wanted.
What do you think makes a good mediator?
I mean, I think from a starting point, you got to be a good problem solver, right? Like, I think most attorneys are, though, successful attorneys. Your clients come to you with a problem that they need help with. And that's where the hard work, attention to detail, those type of things are important. But I think that's just the baseline. If you're got to be a good problem solver, number one, but the really good mediators, I think, have a high degree of, emotional intelligence, that they can read the room, they can read different situations and adapt their approach to whatever type of situation they're dealing with. That's not easy. I mean, I think everybody can work on improving their emotional intelligence. I work really hard at it and try as best I can to do the things you need to do to be attuned to the emotions of a particular situation. But that to me, that's what gets it over the edge a lot of times in settlement. Again, attacking the problem in a way that can make everyone feel heard, understood, and like they're making the decision, right? That it's not a decision that's foisted on them by somebody else. Usually that doesn't promote compromise when you feel like you're forced to do something.
Yeah. As you look back on your work on the litigation side, I know you talked about, some of your learnings and one of your biggest learnings coming from a loss. Do you have any particular moments that you look back on with fondness in terms of, I really made a difference in terms of what I did in that case?
I don't know that it's any one particular case. I think it's the conversations that you have afterwards with your clients where they just say, I'm so happy that you helped me through this, right? And that I don't have to think about this anymore. I mean, this has been weighing on me for years now. We've been, cases drag on a long, long time. And I think as lawyers, you sometimes forget how much it impacts people to be involved in lawsuits. For us, it's every day, right? It's what we deal with as part of our jobs. And you to some extent become callous to how much it's affecting the litigants themselves, whether it's the plaintiff who's injured or feels like they're entitled to money from the defendant, or the defendant who's being sued and feels like, oh my God, the sky's falling. I'm being sued. This person wants a bunch of money from me. How's this all going to work out? And even in cases where, you have this conversation with someone and you say, like, your insurance company is coming in, they're defending you. You really shouldn't look at this like you've got a lot of skin in the game here. Just ride the process out. Even in those situations, people say to me all the time when the case was over, I can't tell you how stressful this was. And being able to hear them say, thank you, I'm really glad that I can get my life back, was always meaningful. And the conversation happened a lot. And I think that's another big plus to me for mediation. Like, you can be part of that process of bringing finality for people. I mean, it doesn't mean they're always going to be on the day of the mediation absolutely thrilled with the outcome. I mean, usually not, right? Like, It's a hard decision to make, but they make it. And I tell people much more often than not, a week from now, you're going to be really glad you made the decision to settle. And a month from now, you're going to be even more glad. And 6 months or a year from now, you're going to look back and say, that was the best decision I ever made. Like, I got my life back. Doesn't always happen. Sometimes there are reasons cases go to trial, right? And it's up to the attorneys to give their clients the best possible advice. But, and I understand when cases don't settle when I'm mediating, you have to be able to accept that you're not going to have 100% hit rate. But I really like it when they do settle because of that feeling that the people involved are going to benefit from it.
I think that is an important point, that we don't recognize what it is like to be on the other side. Part of why I brought up that experience that you had recently with your son is when you suddenly recognize the challenge and the stress of being in that position, that worry. It's a lot to bear when you're a litigant. Yeah,
it's hard. There are a lot of situations where I just look at the people who are involved and I just say that it has to be so difficult, and I can only imagine how stressful it is, and then it's almost impossible to get it out of your mind, right? You do the best you can, but it must be all consuming.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions for people? And I'm not just for people who are thinking of making the leap to mediator, but making any sort of transition in what they're doing. Any learning that you've had from this process about seizing that opportunity or taking the plunge?
In the end, you've got to be comfortable with uncertainty, right? I mean, there's nothing guaranteed about what I'm doing. I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think it was going to work out well and it was the right path for me. But you've got to just be comfortable with the unknown of it. And there's a lot of people that aren't, and that's okay. If that's not for you, that's okay. But if it is something you want to do, just don't be scared, right? Embrace that there's unknown and uncertainty, and that's kind of part of life, right? And there's only so much you can control when you're doing something like that. I mean, I can't control how I'm going to be perceived as a mediator. I've done as much as I could up to this point to sort of set the table for being somebody who you'd want to hire as a mediator. But, and certainly, on the defense side, I sort of know what I'm getting with my colleagues. I've worked with them for a long time. All my time spent in leadership with the ADC, all that helps. And on the plaintiff side, again, I tried to treat people with respect and professionalism, and I hope that, engenders some goodwill. And, but, there's uncertainty there. You don't know how a defense attorney is going to be received on the other side. And that's okay. Like I'm embracing that as part of the journey, and looking forward to working with people like yourself and other plaintiffs' lawyers to see what I'm about, not only as a mediator, as a person.
Well, I'm very excited to follow your path and look forward to my first mediation with you.
Sounds great. Me too. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here, Nolan. And thank you for listening today. Please email us at podcast@coopers.law with questions, comments, feedback, and suggestions for who we should have on the show. Like what you heard? Share us with a colleague and leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. To all of you doing justice out there, happy hunting.